I've noticed it's quite easy for people to get distracted by the sympathetic, tragic, or noble sides of anti-villains and forget that they are, in fact, villains. The fact that they aren't absolute black, that just because the world isn't black and white, doesn't make what they do okay. Anti-villains, or sympathetic villains as I prefer to call them, make it quite easy for people to slip into the Fallacy of Gray. For those who don't know what that is, the Fallacy of Gray is a logical fallacy that occurs when someone argues that because all things are morally or factually complex, shades of gray, they are therefore equally complex or uncertain. This fallacy dismisses the idea that some actions, beliefs, or situations can be closer to the truth or more morally right than others. It essentially replaces a two-color view, black and white, with a one-color view, all gray, ignoring the nuances within those shades of gray. I believe that those who write sympathetic villains must know how to get across the fact that these villains are on the darker side of the scale. If you wish to know how, I have 6 tips you can use to get across why your villain is a villain still, despite their sympathy. If these tips help, be sure to press the like button. Now, let's begin. 1. Show the harmful consequences of their actions. Clearly depict the negative impact of the sympathetic villain's actions on innocent people or the broader society. Show the collateral damage and suffering caused by their methods. In Tales of the Abyss, Van's plan to destroy Axarioth as part of his end goal does play out, and the player is forced to watch things play out, including watching a child that they can't save sink into the molten mud and die. 2. Emphasize their moral ambiguity. Focus on the morally dubious methods they use to achieve their goals. Even if their intentions are noble, the means they employ should be ethically problematic. I could use nearly any Tales franchise villain example here. As for the one I will pick, it'll be Artorias from Tales of Berseria, who brought peace to the world and wished to change it. All it required him doing was things like murdering his 12-year-old brother-in-law in front of his sister-in-law. 3. Contrast with the protagonist. Use the protagonist as a moral contrast to the anti-villain. Show how the protagonist's methods are more ethical or compassionate, highlighting the anti-villain's darker approach. A great example I can use here as a contrast between T'Challa and Killmonger in Black Panther. T'Challa ultimately agrees with Killmonger's assessment of the problem. However, his solution to it is far more peaceful, with him hoping to create a bridge to cooperation instead of imperialism. Killmonger is set on the path of vengeance and domination no matter what, meanwhile. This is a good way to acknowledge that, yes, just because something is a problem, doesn't mean anybody trying to solve it is in the right. 4. Highlight their reluctance to change. Show that the sympathetic villain is unwilling to reconsider their methods or change their ways, even when presented with alternative solutions. This inflexibility can underscore their villainous nature. I mentioned what they did with Killmonger already, but I'm going to toss out another Tales of the Abyss example. In it, the protagonist party ultimately agree with him on the biggest issue in the world and its relationship with the score. However, when presented with their solution to it, which they already started putting into action and asking him to stop his plan for genocide to the world, he refuses because he believes his way is right. They try to talk him out of it, but he just refuses. 5. Demonstrate their self-justification. Illustrate how the sympathetic villain rationalizes the harm they cause, showing a disconnect between their ideals and the real-world consequences of their actions. In X-Men 97, Magneto uses his power to weaken the magnetic poles and basically pulled a worldwide EMP attack. All they ever say is that he killed millions. I'm going to give you the gravity of this. So, let's think about the innocent patients relying on life support machines, ventilation, pacemakers, dialysis machines, and other kinds of critical devices who died. If we saw the newborn babies in the NICUs, who never did anything to him or had a chance at life at all yet, whose lives were threatened and lost because of him, I doubt we'd have as many people saying stupid stuff like Magneto was right. I really hate Magneto. I could go into rants and rants about my hatred of Magneto and people like him because they sabotage the very causes they supposedly work for, but that's something for another time. Anyway, when caught on his actions, he rationalizes what he's done to mutants included by saying that they're kinda strong and that they'll survive and adapt to the world he's trying to make. He knows what he did and he doesn't care since his feelings and agenda matter more than him respecting the existence of others. 6. Show a lack of true redemption. Even if the sympathetic villain has moments of doubt or regret, ensure they ultimately choose actions that reinforce their darker side. avoid giving them a full redemption arc that absolves their villainy. For this example, I'll use Demona from Gargoyles. For those who don't know her, she's one of the main antagonists, and she's given a chance to change her ways time and time again. She sometimes has epiphanies, and then she always rejects them and goes back into her ways. It's so bad that when they time travel, her younger self rejects her future self, saying she'll never become like her, and Demona makes clear to Goliath that his speech to her younger self didn't work because she's remembered it this whole time. I could probably work out some other ways you can keep it going, but still. This should help make clear why your characters are on the darker side of Grey, even if you want to play the Moral Ambiguity game. This should help people truly discern for themselves why someone is a villain despite being sympathetic. And if you want to know more about Villainy, I recommend giving this video a watch.